Rain lashed the windows, a relentless reminder of the storm inside him. Grey light seeped into Michael's apartment, mirroring his mood. The room felt like a prison, each shadow a bar. Everything had gone wrong. He lost his job, the one thing that gave him purpose. His car died, stranding him in his own despair. Sarah left, leaving only a note. The words blurred as he read them over and over, each sentence a dagger to his heart. He felt utterly alone. He paced, phone clutched in his hand, hoping for a message that never came. The silence was deafening, each second stretching into an eternity. Emptiness echoed in his gut, a black hole threatening to swallow him whole. The weight of his failures pressed down on him, suffocating. He sank to the floor, head in his hands, surrounded by darkness. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with despair. He wanted to disappear, to escape the crushing weight of the day. The thought of vanishing into the void was almost comforting. Time crawled, each tick of the clock a reminder of his endless torment. The worst day of his life seemed to stretch on forever. He stared at a photo of happier times, tears blurring his vision. The memories felt like a cruel joke, mocking his current misery. Night fell, but sleep eluded him. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of the day pressing down on him like a lead blanket. Finally, exhaustion took over. He closed his eyes, a single tear rolling down his cheek as he drifted into a restless sleep, hoping for a better tomorrow. He woke with a start, heart pounding. Disoriented, he sat up, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Something was wrong. The air felt heavy, the room too still, as if time itself had paused. A sense of dread pooled in his stomach, growing with each passing second. He was in his childhood bedroom, wallpaper unchanged, toys gathering dust on shelves, relics of a past long forgotten. Impossible. He hadn't lived here in decades. Panic tightened its grip, squeezing the air from his lungs. He stumbled to the window, expecting sunshine, a familiar street, the comforting sights of his old neighborhood. Instead, a graveyard stretched before him, endless rows of headstones under a sickly yellow sky, casting long, eerie shadows. Fear, cold and sharp, cut through him, leaving him paralyzed, unable to move or think clearly. He was dreaming. He knew it with a terrifying certainty, the kind that chills you to the bone. He tried to wake himself, to force his eyes open, but he was trapped, held captive in this desolate dreamscape, a prisoner of his own mind. He fought against the invisible restraints, every muscle straining, but it was futile. His screams were silent, swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere, echoing only in his mind. Despair washed over him, a wave of hopelessness that threatened to drown him. He clutched his head, the mental torment unbearable, wishing for an escape that seemed forever out of reach. This was his reality now, an endless loop of fear and confusion, a nightmare with no end in sight. Days bled into weeks, weeks into years. Each moment stretched into an eternity. He wandered the endless graveyard, the same cracked headstones, the same withered trees. The air was thick with the scent of decay. The sky remained a perpetual, nauseating yellow. Time lost all meaning, the sun never rose, nor did it set. He aged, his hair turning white, his face etched with the despair of his confinement. Each wrinkle told a story of endless nights and hopeless days. He was a prisoner in his own mind, condemned to relive the same nightmare day after day. The walls of his mental prison were unyielding. He tried everything to escape. He ran until his lungs burned, screamed until his voice was hoarse. His cries echoed in the emptiness. He searched for an exit, a doorway, a tear in the fabric of the dream. But the graveyard held him fast. Every path led him back to the beginning. The loneliness was unbearable. He craved human contact, a voice, a touch. The silence was a constant reminder of his isolation. He would talk to the headstones, desperate for any response. His words fell on deaf ears, the stone faces unmoved. But only silence met his pleas. The graveyard was a cemetery of dreams where hope came to die. He sat among the tombstones, reflecting on the life he once had. Memories of laughter and love seemed like distant echoes. He clung to the memories, the only remnants of a world that felt real. An old photograph, a fleeting smile, a touch that once brought warmth. As he walked through the fog, he wondered if he would ever wake up, if this nightmare would ever end. He reached out into the darkness, hoping for a hand to pull him out, but the graveyard's grip was unrelenting. Kneeling among the graves, he felt the weight of his despair. The cemetery of dreams had claimed another soul. One day, a change. A single wildflower pushed through the cracked earth, a splash of color in the monotonous gray. He stared at it, hope flickering in his chest. He knelt, tracing the delicate petals. Could this be it? A sign? A way out? He clung to the hope, a lifeline in the suffocating despair. He woke with a gasp, sweat clinging to his skin. He lay in his bed, the pale morning light filtering through the blinds. For a moment he couldn't tell if it was real or just another layer of the dream. He sat up, his heart pounding. He was home in his own bed. Relief washed over him, so profound it brought tears to his eyes. He had escaped the nightmare, or had he? He looked around, searching for signs that this was truly real. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, a comforting rhythm. He touched the fabric of his bed sheets, feeling the texture beneath his fingers. Taking a deep breath, he tried to calm his racing thoughts. He stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the curtains. Sunlight streamed into the room, illuminating the dust particles in the air. He looked out at the familiar street, the world outside moving as it always had. A small smile crept onto his face, a sense of normalcy returning. Turning away from the window, he felt a glimmer of hope. He walked towards the door, ready to face whatever the day would bring. His hand reached for the door handle, a symbol of his newfound resolve. As he opened the door, light flooded in, washing away the remnants of the nightmare. He stepped out into the hallway, determination in his stride. Ready to embrace life, he walked down the hallway, leaving the nightmare behind. He stepped into the hallway, feeling the cool tiles beneath his feet, the sense of hope still lingering in his chest. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the faint hum of unseen machinery. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. But as he walked, a strange sensation began to creep in. The hallway seemed longer than usual, the walls narrowing ever so slightly. He glanced back, the door to his bedroom now a distant speck. He shook his head, convinced it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. The shadows seemed to dance along the walls, creating an unsettling atmosphere. He continued forward, but the further he went, the more the hallway seemed to stretch, bending and twisting in impossible ways. Panic began to rise in his throat. He quickened his pace, his footsteps echoing in the distorted space. The walls seemed to close in on him, the ceiling lowering, making him feel claustrophobic. Suddenly he found himself back at the beginning, standing in front of his bedroom door. His heart pounded as he reached out to touch the handle, the same handle he had grasped minutes ago. He opened the door, hoping to find his room, his sanctuary. Instead, he was met with the same endless hallway, stretching out before him like a labyrinth. The sense of déjà vu was overwhelming. A sense of dread settled over him. He was trapped, caught in an endless loop. The glimmer of hope that had once shone so brightly now flickered, threatened by the encroaching shadows of despair. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and stepped forward once more, determined to find a way out of this surreal nightmare. The air grew colder, and the silence more oppressive. But with each step, the hallway seemed to mock him, twisting and turning, leading him back to the beginning. He clenched his fists, refusing to give in to the fear. He had faced the darkness before and emerged, albeit briefly. He would do it again. The walls seemed to whisper, their voices a haunting reminder of his predicament. As he walked, he noticed small changes. A picture frame that wasn't there before, a faint smell of lavender in the air. Clues, perhaps? He latched onto these details, using them as markers to navigate the endless corridor. Step by step, he moved forward, each moment a battle against the encroaching despair. The changes were subtle, but they gave him a sliver of hope. The endless loop continued, but so did his resolve. He would find a way out. He had to. The hallway seemed to pulse with a life of its own, each beat a reminder of the time slipping away. He couldn't afford to lose hope now. He began to examine the walls more closely, tracing his fingers along the patterns and textures. There had to be something he was missing, some hidden key to unlock this nightmare. The walls felt cold and unyielding, but he refused to give up. Each touch, each observation was a step closer to freedom. After what felt like an eternity, he noticed a slight indentation in the wall, a barely perceptible seam. His heart raced as he pressed against it, and to his astonishment, a hidden door swung open. Beyond it lay another corridor, but this one felt different, less oppressive. He stepped through, hoping this was the way out. The new corridor was dimly lit, the air warmer and less stifling. He moved cautiously, aware that this could be another trick. The walls here were smoother, the floor more even. It felt like progress, but he remained vigilant, knowing the loop could still ensnare him. As he walked, he encountered obstacles, fallen debris, narrow passages, and sudden drops. Each challenge tested his resolve, but he pressed on, driven by the hope of escape. The obstacles seemed designed to break his spirit, but he refused to let them. In the midst of the challenges, he found another clue, a cryptic message etched into the wall. It read, "The key lies within." He pondered its meaning, realizing that the answer might not be in the physical world, but within himself. He had to confront his fears and doubts to break free. He paused, reflecting on his journey. The endless loop was not just a physical trap, but a mental one. He needed to find the strength within himself to overcome it. He closed his eyes, focusing on his inner resolve, drawing strength from his past victories and the hope that still flickered within him. With renewed determination, he took a decisive step forward. The corridor seemed to respond, the walls shifting and the path ahead becoming clearer. He felt a surge of confidence, knowing that he was on the right track. The loop was weakening and he was gaining the upper hand. Finally, he saw it. A door at the end of the corridor, bathed in a soft, welcoming light. His heart soared as he approached it, the sense of freedom almost tangible. He reached out, his hand trembling with anticipation, and grasped the handle. As he stepped through the door, he was enveloped in light. The oppressive darkness and the endless loop were behind him. He had done it. He had broken free. The sense of relief was overwhelming, and he took a moment to savor his newfound freedom. He looked back at the corridor one last time, a reminder of the nightmare he had endured. But now, it was just a memory, a testament to his strength and determination. He turned away, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, knowing that he had the power to overcome any challenge. The endless loop had ended, but his journey was just beginning. With each step, he moved further away from the darkness and closer to the light. The future was uncertain, but he was ready to face it, armed with the knowledge that he could conquer any obstacle. The nightmare was over and a new chapter awaited.